We have got the biggest problem of AIDS in the world. 80% of AIDS patients are found in Africa, and it has paralyzed and devastated our health systems. It has ruined families. It has stopped our progress in economic terms. Africa is dying.
Vincent is 14 years old. He is one of literally millions of AIDS orphans in Africa.
Vincent has been ill for quite a long time. He is currently suffering from cryptococcal meningitis.
The antiretroviral drugs that could save his life are too expensive for most people in Africa.
We want to keep you a little bit longer so that your headache goes and this pain in your chest is treated. No. Okay, fine.
It's sub-Saharan Africa that's been hardest hit by the AIDS epidemic. Today, there are an estimated 25 million HIV-positive people in the region. Most of them will die in the next 10 years unless life-saving antiretroviral drugs become more widely available.
Today in Uganda, you can actually talk about the period before AIDS and the period after AIDS in terms of the way society conducts its affairs.
In most Western countries, antiretroviral drugs, ARVs, have transformed AIDS from a death sentence to a chronic illness and saved thousands of lives. Over the last year, developing countries have been intensifying their fight to bring down the cost of these drugs. And they've had some success. Prices have fallen, sometimes by a factor of 10.
I will tell you the name of the game. In pharmaceuticals, the name of the game is monopoly. If you have a monopoly, you can charge what you like. So what we are saying, the only way to bring prices down is by competition.
If we talk about antiretroviral therapy, we're talking about 3 drugs that patients have to take at least each day. And over the course of the last few years, pharmaceutical companies, both research and development based and generics, or the copies companies, have reduced prices from somewhere between $12,000 as you'd find in the US or Europe, down to around somewhere between $300 to $1,000 per annum.
But even $300 per year is beyond the reach of most developing countries' health services. Uganda has been widely hailed as Africa's showcase for HIV/AIDS management programs.
The only way forward was to warn the people that, look, there is a disease which has come, it is new, there is no cure, it is transmitted through sex, and please take note. And they came out openly, government came out openly and declared that there was an AIDS problem in Uganda and you needed help.
An early education and prevention program has lowered the HIV rate from over 14% to 8% in 10 years.
This is a big achievement. But I want it put in perspective. 8% prevalence and the current rate of 100,000 new cases of HIV/AIDS per year is appallingly high. It's still too high.
10 years ago, the Ugandan government set up centers dedicated to HIV research and treatment to find ways of dealing with the epidemic. Dr. Peter Mujenyi is a director of the Joint Clinical Research Center in Kampala.
The appalling nature in which the AIDS patients found themselves forced us to go into providing treatment, at least for those who could afford it. Our primary role was research on HIV/AIDS, but we built up expertise in HIV treatment, and it looked unethical for us to sit by while patients were suffering. So we started offering HIV treatment, and this has become a center of excellence.
Uganda realized that the most effective way of tackling the disease was to provide sufferers with the same treatment they'd received in the West.
If you want to achieve prevention beyond a certain level, you need to supplement it with treatment. People on treatment are more likely to participate in preventive programs because they have hope for living.
Uganda is one of several African countries currently taking part in a scheme known as the Accelerating Access Initiative. It was introduced last year by UNAIDS in response to the growing AIDS crisis in the developing world.
Accelerating access is really the redoubling of support that the UN agencies provide to countries, primarily developing countries right across the world, in strengthening their national responses to HIV, from psychosocial support right up to treatments for opportunistic infections, and most notably antiretroviral therapy.
Up to now, the scheme's only been available in the capital Kampala. Even here, patients have to pay for their drugs.
The UNAIDS project came at the time when nobody else wanted to do anything about antiretroviral drugs. So I think they deserve some credit. It didn't substantially get the cost of the drugs reduced, but it had side important benefits, which included training of medical caregivers in the use of antiretrovirals, and above all, it really demystified antiretrovirals.
Eversi Kalamira is an English teacher who lives near Kampala.
In 1997, when my husband started falling sick on and off, we found out that we were HIV positive. It came as a big blow, but I'd got some blood transfusion from somebody who later died of AIDS. Then we accepted it as maybe the cause. And from that time, we agreed, we lived perfectly normal because we were not blaming each other. In 1998, our child became very sick and passed away. I also became very sick and was hospitalized for some time.
Last year, Eversi's husband died. By then, she was too ill to work or care for her family.
I was really sick. I wouldn't even recognize people at that time. And I was delirious most of the time. I was in hospital.
But even the lower prices for ARVs negotiated by the UNAIDS program are beyond the reach of most Ugandans.
We started looking for alternatives, and we found that we could get the same drugs at half the cost. And when we started getting the same drugs at half the cost, it either coincided with a reduction by brand manufacturers, or the brand manufacturers responded to competition.
What we need here are a range of suppliers. Clearly the pharmaceutical companies, the research-based industries have a role to play, but also the generics industries have a role to play. And it's quite clear that in many developing countries, prices have come down because of competition.
And the cost now of the brand is now a third of what it used to be. And the cost of generics has also come down because they are also traders, just like brand manufacturers, and they also respond to competition.
Generic drugs are cheaper copies of the patented originals, but some question whether they are of the same quality. The Indian drug company Cipla is one of the biggest generic manufacturers in the world.
So you mean to say the multinational companies have not picked up our products in the open market and tested them? Believe me, if there was anything wrong with the products that we are marketing, they would be shouting from the rooftops.
The Accelerating Access Initiative is already making a difference in Uganda. But to afford the drugs, families often have to pool their resources to pay for treatment.
I haven't had a lot of problems.
Eversi was close to death when she was taken to the Mild May Center. one of the clinics that participates in the Accelerating Access Drugs program. She's now been on the drugs for 6 months.
Since I started them, I got a change. My appetite was reactivated, and I began feeling stronger from that time, and I was able to go back to work after almost 2 years without stepping in class. Now I'm able to attend to some lessons.
The argument that ARV drugs are too complicated for people in the developing world to use no longer holds any credence.
Some of the most sophisticated medical drugs are anti-cancer drugs. Anti-cancer drugs are highly toxic, but are used in every country in Africa. So why do they have to select antiretroviral drugs that are less complicated than anti-cancer drugs and say these are the ones which are not going to be used because they are too sophisticated? And after all, think about a patient. You are dying and you got a drug which can turn around your life. Are you not going to take it?
Eversi's improvement is dramatic evidence of how antiretroviral drugs can transform a patient's life.
I can tell you that my life, and I believe the lives of my colleagues, has changed. A patient who comes to you, you know there is hope for such a patient. Previously, it was like a funeral, only postponed.
Vincent is being treated for his meningitis caused by AIDS. His extended family has now found someone to pay for life-saving drugs.
I'll be coming again to see you later on in the evening. Yeah.
To date, ARV drugs have only been available in the capital. Now Uganda's extending the program to rural areas.
I think the most important message we have is that it can be done. You can reduce your infection rates. Anyone who doubts that, they should come here.
The fight for affordable drugs in Africa first made world headlines last year. A consortium of 42 major pharmaceutical companies took the South African government to court over its right to import or manufacture generic drugs to treat AIDS sufferers. After a global campaign by activist groups, trades unions and NGOs, the 42 companies finally withdrew the case in April 2001. It was widely regarded as a humiliating climb down. But even before they announced they were dropping the case, the companies had begun reducing the prices of their patented drugs. It was a victory for the developing world.
It was very important that that court case went the way it did, because first of all, it highlighted the issue globally, and then I think it made us read the laws more accurately. And I think all along the South African government was right, and I think even those pharmaceuticals with their power and resources had not hired the best lawyers.
Symbolically, it has shown that with public opinion pressure, you can change pharmaceutical companies' position. They are among the biggest power in the world nowadays, and it shows that public opinion can still influence them, and they're scared about it. For the developing world, it was a very important victory, and it has given a sort of positive sign for a lot of developing countries to go for generics. They understood that the patent holder would not sue them if they choose the generic way.
But despite the court case outcome, the South African government shocked the world by announcing that it would not start using ARV drugs. It claimed the cost was still beyond the reach of the public health system, which simply did not have the infrastructure to administer the drugs.
Amazingly, the court case was in Pretoria, in this country. Unfortunately, almost the next day, the Minister of Health announced that they would not import antiretroviral drugs for the public health system.
Our government has let us down, and in many ways, and has not shown real leadership in this issue, and has not, really focused on finding solutions.
There has never been an in-principle stance that says that these drugs are never ever going to be available to South Africans in the public sector. It's always been fight for what we can do on a long-term sustainable basis.
South Africa has the highest rate of HIV infection in the world, with 4.7 million HIV-positive people, 1 in 9. So far, national government initiatives have done very little to contain the epidemic.
If the government continues to move at this pace that it does currently, we are going to run out of patience. And we are going to do what we did to the apartheid government in this particular matter, to our own democratic government. And on the basis of our democratic constitution, that is our right.
South Africa is one of the richest countries on the continent. Uganda is a very, very poor country by comparison. If Uganda can do it, South Africa can do it many, many times better and on a larger scale. Use your brains, improvise. It's a crisis, and in every crisis, methods of dealing with it can be found.
But while the government prevaricated, organizations like Médecins Sans Frontières, in partnership with provincial clinics, had already started projects like these. They provide AZT to pregnant women to reduce rates of MTCT, mother-to-child transmission, of the virus. Kunjulwe Charlie lives in this shack in Kailicha. She is HIV positive.
I am 34 years old. I have 4 children. The youngest is 1 year and 2 months.
Kunjulwe's husband died of AIDS last year. She was given AZT when she was pregnant, and her baby was born free of the virus.
More than 7,000 women have been through this MTCT program, and we have now the first results of the transmission rate, how many babies were infected. And in fact, we got now 11% transmission rate instead of 30 to 35%, which means basically that hundreds of babies have been prevented to get HIV positive, to be infected by the disease. And that's definitely good news. So it shows the program works.
Influenced by the success of projects like these, South Africa's government has at last bowed to pressure and started a program to reduce mother-to-child transmission of the disease.
We're targeting 90,000 women, and it's a significant number considering we've got 1 million deliveries in South Africa a year, and at a 23-24% prevalence, you have 200,000 women who probably will be positive, and 30% of those will transmit without an intervention, and with an intervention you have that.
AZT has saved her baby, but Kunjulwe now has full-blown AIDS.
I was 4 months pregnant when I started getting sick. I was sick until last January when I got TB. I was very ill and I just gave up completely. I gave the title deeds of my house to my mother. I said, I am giving them to you in case I die.
It is the private sector in South Africa which is now beginning to understand the real cost of AIDS to the country and to their profits if the drugs don't become available.
All along, the question of HIV/AIDS, we've been struggling with the employers that it is part and parcel of the activities that are taking place in the workplace. It should not be isolated from other health and safety issues. It must be within the health and safety policies of companies.
Big corporations like Daimler Chrysler have started providing the HIV-positive members of their workforce, along with their families, with ARVs. It is ironic that major global corporations, usually seen as socially and morally unaccountable, are stepping in to fulfill what should be the government's responsibility.
everybody in South Africa, is worried about this virus. So workers are very happy when the management is also taking initiatives in order to help them.
Working with provincial clinics, Médecins Sans Frontières have started an antiretroviral program in Kaalisha on the outskirts of Cape Town. Kunjulwe has been chosen to take part and has begun her treatment.
We have started a pilot project with triple therapy using antiretrovirals. And it's really rewarding to see those people that you see going down and down through the month. And as soon as you use this powerful cocktail, they are suddenly going up, and very quickly.
I started taking the pills on the 29th of May. For the first 2 weeks, I had headaches and nausea. But then it stopped, and I started feeling better. I'm eating normally and feeling well right up to today. I'm feeling strong now.
It's amazing how powerful it works. We knew that it works, but it's good to see, and it's rewarding for doctors that you see you can suddenly make people go up the mountain instead of going down.
Kunjulwe visits the clinic weekly to have her progress monitored and to collect her drugs.
I take the pills every day.
Now, with her health improving, she's beginning to plan a future.
Now that I'm feeling healthier, I'm thinking of going back to school and trying for something better for my children, so I can get a good job. The thing I want most is to protect my children from getting ill. I know that they depend on me. It would be terrible if I were to be sick and also be looking after sick children at the same time. That's the one thing that makes my heart sore. I do have hope that I will be well and be stronger than before. I am so much stronger since I started taking the pills.
Dr. Herman Reuter used to work with the Mother-to-Child Prevention Project. Now he is with the antiretroviral pilot program at the same clinic.
In my clinic, for the first year where we didn't use antiretrovirals, we saw many patients die. And it was always difficult telling the patients there are medicines that could help, but we don't have them, they're too expensive.
Matthews Damani is one of his patients. He works as a cleaner at the clinic. He refused to accept that he was HIV positive until he became seriously ill with AIDS.
Here in South Africa, we took the issue of the HIV light. We always said there is no such thing, This disease is from the other countries like America,
Counseling and treatment at the clinic have changed his attitudes and given him hope.
Very well. I can say I'm a hero of the drugs now.
Yeah, hero of the drugs. We're doing this project to show to everybody, especially our government, that it is possible to treat people with antiretrovirals in South Africa, in a township, in a squatter camp.
Will projects like this one finally force the South African government into starting a national antiretroviral program?
There is this disease, what we call is HIV, and this is now in South Africa, and then we need to face it.
Matthews belongs to a support group. He feels he can help others. He'd like to train to be a counselor.
I'm the one who's giving them the hope. So he said to me, now you are strong and you are healthy. And then you are the one who's give us the hope that there is life,
Prevention without treatment doesn't work. Treatment without prevention is not acceptable. But prevention without treatment doesn't work. We all know that nowadays.
When there's no treatment, there will never be any openness about HIV.
These clinics work closely with local educational and activist groups like Ulwazi and Treatment Action Campaign to get the message across. But the battle for access to affordable drugs isn't over yet. Can the drug companies go on ignoring growing outrage from around the world and still protect their patents and profits? Developing countries want change. They've tabled a whole-day debate to clarify trade and intellectual property rights at the next World Trade Organization meeting. They want to ensure their rights to the drugs they need for health emergencies. Drugs can't save everyone in Africa who has AIDS, but access to them at affordable prices can go a long way to help contain this epidemic.
We are talking about people dying. This is what we are talking about. We are talking about people in severe pain, some of it excruciating. This is what we are talking about. Where is the compassion?